Hey, it's Una, your host of Goals, Grit, and some woo woo shit. And I don't know if I've talked about this on the show yet. I probably have. But a few weeks ago, we hit a fun milestone and hit over 100,000 downloads. And just for reference, the show is about 18 months old at this point. So to be honest, I have no idea if 100,000 downloads in 18 months is good or bad comparatively. And if you know, to be honest, I don't want to know. I don't want to start comparing myself to other podcasts, but I do want to celebrate my milestone. So if you are listening, you have played a part in that. And I just want to send you the biggest audio hug with all of my gratitude for that. Thank you. And here's another weird thing that's just started happening. I've started to get a lot of unsolicited requests to be on the show. And it's usually an agency or a PR person who will reach out and say, "Hey there, Una, I really enjoyed your last episode on insert title of next episode," in this totally different font. And sometimes it will add a little something like, "That girl sure has spunk," or whatever. And then it will say, "I have a great guest for you." And then it will suggest a dude who has a crypto app, or a woman who has a new weight loss gum with protein and ashwagandha in it or something. And it's so fucking clear that they have never listened to the show and they have no idea what we talk about. And by the way, I have total empathy for this situation because I have been in this position where I got convinced myself that I would get super famous and everyone would buy my book as long as I landed some really big podcasts. So I've looked into hiring those agencies and they promise to land you a bunch of guest appearances. So if you've ever been tempted by that, I totally get it. And I will say, just don't do that. Don't spend the money on that. Personally target shows that you will actually listen to, because if you listen to them, your audience will probably like them as well. Okay. But this is how I found out about today's guest. She did that. She personally reached out to me. She is obviously a longtime listener of the show. And her name is Gina Gallaun. Gina is the author of Embrace Your Brave in 30 Days. Gina quit her very awesome career to go on a world trip to interview women about what courage looks like in their everyday lives. So she captured their stories and then she collaborated with each woman to create journaling prompts centered on courage. And dude, when I got this book in the mail, I gave it a quick flip. And then one of the questions caught my eye and I was like, "Oh, that's a really good question." And then so I read the story that went with the question. And they're just quick one-page stories. And then I kind of read the next story and I was like, okay, well, that's one. What other kind of stories are in here? And then, cut to half an hour later, I'm sitting there surrounded by all my unopened mail and sending Gina a message saying, "Hey, when can you come on the show?" And that day was today. So I can't wait for you to meet her. Here's Gina.
It's time to get your head out of your ass and start creating a life of no regrets. Whether you want to lose weight, get rich, or manifest a hot threesome on the beach, you're gonna wanna turn this up. This is Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit with your host, best-selling author and professional butt kicker, Una Duncan.
All right, my friends, we've got Gina Gallaun here, and I am so excited to ask her about her awesome new book, Embracing Your Brave in 30 Days. So, Gina, you open the book by talking about how you used to go swimming with your dad and how that was a metaphor for a lot of the experiences in this book. Can you tell us about that experience of swimming with your dad when you were younger?
I'd love to. And also, I'm so happy to be here. I just enjoy your podcast. It's just like when I feel down, for example, because something in my day didn't go the way I hoped it would go, I enjoy listening to your podcast. It's like a fresh breeze of authenticity. So fun. So excited to be on your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. So I grew up in Germany. That's my accent. And in the US, I feel like the most common holiday destination is Mexico. I'm now learning. Yeah. And I think for Germans, it's France. I mean, it's right next door, So we would spend our holidays by the Atlantic Ocean in France. And the Atlantic actually has huge waves, in meters, I would say 2 meters. So that's higher than 6 foot. I know that. So super high waves. And I was a kid. I was under 10. And my dad, I don't know how my mom even allowed this, but my dad invited me, to go swimming with him. And I just saw these huge waves and I saw that there were people on the other side of those waves. I had no idea how they were, still alive. But my dad offered to teach me how to dive through the waves. You're basically letting the wave tower up and then you go right through the center of it, facing that huge thing. And I just remember that's the first memory I have of having to decide, do I want to be brave or not? Do I want to take this chance or not? And so he taught me how to just dive through it and then come out on the other side, enjoy the bliss of the sun and the seagulls. And to me, that's like my number one metaphor in life right now, is courage sometimes looks like just diving in to the thing that might feel scary.
Yeah. And so you started this project. So tell us about the project and how this book is structured.
Yes. Well, 3 years ago, I found myself just feeling uninspired in life and for what's ahead. So I made that kind of big step to quit my job and decide to go on a world trip. I just had that inspiration. Somebody asked me, what would it be like you to do if you were not afraid right now? And I was like, what I would really love to do is go travel, meet interesting people, actually interview women on what courage looks like in their life, because I want to be inspired, So I did. I quit my job. I went traveling, and then I got to interview women on courage, and I ended up feeling so inspired that I thought I want to share these stories, with other women too. So the idea is to have a little world trip in a book, a 30-day trip, where every day you have a story from a woman in Ireland or Africa, Brazil, and you hear her story, and they're all different areas in life. It can be courage in your family and romance, at work, or like fitness. So you get to read that story. I purposefully made them short so that any busy woman actually is realistic. Like it's a 2-page story, I really summarized it. And then my part that I also really loved is that I worked with these women to design journaling prompts so that after you read a story, right, you feel inspired. But now how can you take that inspiration, that energy, and apply it to like moving your life a little further?
To your own life.
Yes, to your own life. Exactly.
Yeah. It's not just you get a hit of inspiration. You go, oh, good, good for that person. That's so great. No, you have to actually apply it. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. You really have that opportunity. So there's these unique journaling prompts, and you can take a moment, right, to journal through that. And that's where I'm hearing from the people who go through this 30-day journey. That's where the good ideas come of, I'm going to do this. Yeah.
Totally. And I'm going to ask you about so many of those stories because they're great stories. And I want to talk more about your story. But first, I want to talk about fear in general. How do we know when a fear is something that's really legit? Like, I have a fear of walking off that cliff because if I do, I'm going to die. Like, that's a really legit fear versus something that we should overcome. Like those waves, actually on the other side of those waves is something super, super special. And you're not going to die getting through those waves. What are the questions? Because you're so good at coming up with questions. How can we tell the difference? And you also talk about one of your stories is a woman who said that she actually started to recognize that her fear was an indication that she was doing something important. And now she savors fear. Whenever she feels fear, she goes, oh yes, this is what I want. So these are such different reactions to fear, So how can we tell if our fear is the don't do that, that's a bad thing versus overcome this and it will change everything?
Yes. I mean, first, I think you're going to notice it in your body first, right? You're going to have sweaty armpits, sweaty palms, heart racing, dry mouth, maybe so you notice just feeling uncomfortable in your body. And then there's going to be thoughts. Often it's that you're not safe. That is actually what you can kind of, some variation of that, because that is what fear was originally for, to keep you safe. So that makes so much sense that you're thinking that. So then we kind of have to talk with that idea of, you're not safe, because that's where, my sister is a psychotherapist, and she says that our brains and our bodies, kind of don't fit. They're kind of like out of date in a way, the way they're designed for the kind of life we live right now, because now we have to question that feeling of really are we really not safe? Is it an actual physical danger right now? Or is that a thought of, if it's like humans judging us or us looking stupid, is it physical or not physical? I think is a good differentiator.
Totally. Because we can have that palm sweating, that reaction, and it could just be that we have to go have a hard conversation with someone. It's not that we are in mortal danger. And you said that the way you started to change your relationship to fear is, the quote you said is, I demoted fear to an advisory role in my decision-making process.
Yeah.
Talk about that for a second.
I still fear, it just still feels so uncomfortable, fear. I actually am really impressed that woman Sheena from Ireland, right? That she's my motivation. She really actually now, when she notices all this sweaty armpit stuff going on, she actually savors the fear. I really want to get there. I have to say that I don't savor the fear yet. It's like,
no, me neither.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that idea to first of all, if the fear has an advisory role, that means I talk to that person, right? Like I would talk to an advisor and ask questions and understand more versus the boss, the decision maker, who might make decisions without having a conversation with me. I think that's the big difference, to be like, okay, I'm afraid, this feels super uncomfortable. What's going on? What are my values again? And like, what do I want out of life again? Yeah. To have that conversation.
Yeah. So you moved your decision making, you demoted fear and you promoted your concept of what, of your values of love.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. And unfortunately, often on the other side of that wave, the fear is exactly my life goal, or my values. Right. So I have to work with it.
One thing, when I first picked up your book, what I was expecting, Gina, was to have these super like insane stories of like someone who was afraid to climb Mount Everest, but then they did it and they decided they didn't really need boots, or like some like, people who do like insane things or whatever. Yes. But actually the stories are like someone blowing a really important presentation.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And even that, like, I just think about that and I'm like, I feel fear. Dancing in public, having difficult conversations. So why did you make the choice to keep these big inspiring stories actually really sort of small everyday stories?
I noticed that myself, that when I hear a story of this like single woman running into a burning building and saving triplings, that's cool. And
yeah, it's cool.
Like, but it's hard for me to draw the connection to my life.
I agree.
So I asked around a little bit. I think I asked probably like 20 girlfriends, what they feel most inspired for and what are the kind of things they like soak up or like eat up, and they said it's actually normal people like you and me doing something brave that would also be a brave step for me. And it can be having a hard conversation with your mother-in-law,
Yeah. Okay. You tell a story and then you ask the reader to reflect on their lives with questions. And the questions you ask are so good, Gina. And one of the questions after the first story is, if your worst fear happened, what could you do to still be okay? Which is such a great question. And one story that I think exemplifies this so much. Can you tell the story about the theater critic?
Oh, yeah. I'm like shuddering thinking about that, because that woman was a teenager when this happens, like, let's say 14. She's in Romania, but this would happen anywhere, to be honest. Like, it doesn't matter. And she plays Juliet in the school theater play. Big deal, main role. And the local journalist from her Romanian village comes to watch the play and write an article. And she actually felt good about her performance, right? That evening, her family was there. They were smiling. She got flowers. Like, it felt satisfying to do this. The next day, she picks up the newspaper and the journalist said that they shouldn't have let somebody with acne like that play Juliet. Like, I had acne as a teenager, and like, even if somebody doesn't say that, there's already enough shame, right?
Of course.
Oh, God.
Oh, my God. When I read that, yeah, it was like they shouldn't have let someone so ugly play Juliet, as if Juliet had acne. And I read that, and as a former actor, I was like, that is everyone's worst fear. Like, that's exactly. So, so what would be something someone could do to feel safe in that? Well, she did a great job. Tell us what she did.
Yes. I mean, she really actually considered, right, being done with this now, because why would you put yourself into a situation like that? That's horrible. And then she also, it was her friends and family that helped her, right, realize that she does really enjoy performing. Like, she does love playing. And so she basically reasoned her way through, okay, so I love doing this. If I do this, there will be critics, right? Like, how could I be okay? How could I do the thing I love even when there's critics? And in her case, it was focusing on her family, right? who comes to those plays, they smile at her, they wave at her. She can feel the warmth of their love, the flowers, focusing on them. And the thing is, this horrible thing happened to her as a teenager, right? But the thing is, now she works in this international company. She's a grown woman. And this whole experience and her figuring out a way to navigate through that fear with personal style, this fear of being critiqued in public, now serves her so well in that company. Like when she does presentations and, when there's criticism, like she handles it like a pro. She's an inspiration.
I would feel if you got through that, you'd be invincible.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, that's true.
Another question that you asked is, what's something scary that you might be facing soon? And I thought about this for a second. I was like, well, I'm getting older. I'm going to go through menopause. My body's going to change. My parents are going to get old. And then I started, of course, getting scared. And so I was wondering, Gina, what is the benefit, do you think, in shining a light on our fears? Like, what's the difference between considering future scary stuff versus just making yourself anxious?
I think that the big difference is if you think about it and then you ask yourself, okay, what would it be like me to do in that situation? That would feel satisfying to me and I could be proud of myself. Right. My friend and I did this really weird thing, but that actually worked, where we watched the Netflix show Black Mirror. I don't know if you know of it. It's
barely, because that's scary for me.
Yes, super scary.
Yeah.
So it's like future scenarios that are dark. It's if AI goes wrong or, right. Scary stuff. We watched that and afterwards we felt like tense and scared. But then we actually sat down and we thought about it and we talked about, okay, if that worst case happened to us, what could we do that would make us feel proud in those circumstances of how we handled them? And it was amazing, the ideas that come to you. And actually afterwards, we felt better than before even watching the show, because we just felt like, oh my gosh, I have an amazing plan for if this thing happens. So
do you remember, Gina, what the dark scenario was and what your plan is? I think we all need it. What do we do if AI goes crazy?
Yeah, I wasn't that one. I think it was one where robots. Yeah, it was like robots going, basically killing all the humans. Okay. Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, you got a plan for that?
Well, yeah, I mean, the plan was just, until the very last minute. In that case, there was no way to fight the robots. Like there was no way to win. So the plan was just, to surround ourselves with our best friends and be together until the end, telling appreciation stories and maximizing it out until the end. If we know the end is coming, then how can we make it good? Yeah.
I think that's as good a plan as any. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So let's get back to real life here. But I'm really glad we got the robot thing sorted, because now I feel less anxious about that. Okay. So you give an example of you leaving on your sabbatical. And what listeners need to know is that Gina had a really good job. She was a founder in a company that when I found out that she had founded this company, I was like, what? You're involved with them? If anyone's listening, it's Wise, which is Gina can explain it better than I can, but it's a fintech, online banking with multiple currencies. It's amazing. It's changed my life. Anyone, if you deal with multiple currencies, you need to know about this, wise.com. Anyway, so Gina's working for them and she's got a really good job. And the kind of job that everyone's like, you would be crazy to leave. And yet she wanted to leave. Kind of you had the itch. And Gina, it kind of reminded me of so many times when I was younger, sitting around with a girlfriend and she's deciding about whether she should leave her relationship. And she's like, it's a 7 out of 10 relationship. He's really nice. Do I break up with him in hopes of finding a 9 or a 10? But I'm risking nothing, getting nothing and being lonely and dying alone and never having children and all the big fears that people have, right? So you had fears of never having such amazing career opportunities again. So can you tell us the questions you asked yourself to make this decision clear for you?
Yeah. And I have to say, I wasn't the founder, but I was one of the earliest employees. So I started when we had less than 50. And when I left, we had 2,500 employees. Oh, and
right.
Anybody's looking for a job. It's such a cool place to work. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I was a part of that fintech for 8 years. And it's the kind of place, I love those places where if you are ambitious and you have motivation and you want to learn and grow, there's always an opportunity to grow more. And it's so satisfying, to be in an environment like that, building something meaningful.
Right. So listen to how much you love this job. And now
I did love it.
So talk about that.
Yes. And I was there for 8 years and there were still amazing opportunities to grow. And what it felt like to me was, a new like promotion or new growth opportunity was presented to me that sounded amazing. And I noticed that me taking that promotion would have actually been a fear-driven decision, even though, it maybe didn't look like that on the outside, but I knew that my main thought for accepting that promotion was like, I will never get career opportunities like this again, anywhere else. And I just know that any fear-driven motivation just doesn't lead to this, like the best outcomes in my life. So I was like, oh, that's a sign for me, that there might be a better path.
You heard yourself having this thought of scarcity.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So when I'm going back to my friends saying I'm in this 7 relationship, ooh, if I break up with this guy, there might be nothing. Like, again, that's a scarcity mindset. Of course, there's tons of 8s, 9s, 10s out there.
Yes. And it's also, the motivation for staying in the relationship or staying in the job, like the brain friendly motivation for that would be to say, I want to be in this relationship because this is the guy who has all the values that I was looking for, or I want to stay in this job because this is exactly how I want to grow in the future. This is the perfect place. Like, this is what our brain needs to feel like, good about life, but to say I'm staying because there might not be anything better, it doesn't feel good. It just, it doesn't feel good.
Here's another thing I want to ask you. You interviewed people from so many different countries: Hungary, India, Ghana, Brazil, Vietnam. I love at the beginning you said that I wanted this to feel like a trip around the world for people because that was your biggest joy, your desire to do that. Why else was that important? And did you find that there was a cultural aspect to what people were afraid of, or are fears universal?
I love talking about that because that was my big surprise. That was my curiosity, right, in taking this trip, is like, how different are our fears and how different are our ways to overcoming fears. So I want to tell the story from the lady in India who her brave thing was to not accept an arranged marriage because she had met a guy that she really wanted to be with, and her brave thing was to decide for herself, I'm going to marry this guy. And the thing I never knew about arranged marriages, at least in India, is that why that required courage is because all her girlfriends in arranged marriages, when they were hitting marriage problems, they could complain to their parents and, blame somebody else.
Right.
And so this lady from India said, that felt scary to take full ownership for my own decision. And knowing that when we hit problems, which every couple does, I have nobody to blame other than we have to figure it out. Like, I have to figure it out, and so I thought, oh my gosh, even though we don't face arranged marriages, even as an option, we know exactly what it feels like, right? The taking responsibility for ourselves.
Can you give another example of where the cultural aspect came into play when it came to bravery and how overcoming bravery? Overcoming fear.
What I've really found is that what is culturally different is the scenario that you face. That is different. But then fear feels the same way, of course, no matter where you are. And then to overcome it, it's the same kind of courage. Like, it's the courage to take responsibility for your own mistakes. It's the courage to face public shame. It's the courage to be vulnerable. Like, all of that is actually the same, which made me feel really connected to all the women across the world. Like, we have to figure this out in the same way, different circumstances.
Yeah, it's true. So I did notice there's some commonalities, like physical safety, financial security, everybody laughing at you, loneliness. And sometimes it was a mindset shift. That was all that was needed. You didn't have, they didn't have to leave their marriage or, jump over a snake, which was one story that happened in there.
Yeah, right.
Sometimes it really was actually, no, the brave thing I need to do is just accept 100% responsibility for my results and not blame anyone else or any circumstances.
Yes.
And that is scary.
Yes, that is scary. The other international thing I found, which is interesting, this is now not the women that I interviewed, but these are the women that are reading the stories and then telling me, what fears are they facing? So one international fear is I am too old. Which is so interesting because when I wrote this book, I had the assumption that the women who would most benefit from it are women younger than 60. Yeah, because
Okay.
I thought by the time I'm 60 or by the time women are 60, they have figured out courage is literally what I thought. Which now is funny because now I'm getting all this feedback of, well, there's a new fear, right? Like that comes as early as whatever, 30s, but that you're too old to do this. And yeah, it's like all over the world.
That's so interesting that's so universal. I assumed that was a little bit more of a Western culture thing, where we don't have the reverence for elders that I know some other cultures do. So that's so interesting to hear. That's and kind of sad that that's so universal.
It is sad.
Old. Yeah,
it is sad.
I also like that you highlight that courage doesn't have to be this big blowing up your life, and there's really small ways to be brave. Can you give us an example of a little small bravery step that people can make?
Oh, yes. This would, of course, depend on the scenario. So in romance, the example I remember is as opposed to canceling the wedding, leaving the relationship. My friend, Brie, she said, you know what really took courage, like in romance recently, was to join her husband in an activity that he liked. And which was like what's the disc golf thing?
Oh yeah.
The disc golf. Yeah. And she just felt like she wasn't going to be good at that. You know, she felt afraid that she would look stupid doing it, but knew that it was also an opportunity to connect to her husband in a fun, new way. So I think it took her a few weeks. And then she said, I'm going to take this step. And it takes some courage for me to do this. And yeah. And then afterwards, she totally enjoyed how they got to have fun in a new way. And of course, even laugh about the mistakes, right? And the looking stupid. Yeah.
Another example where the courage came from a mindset shift was the Lan, a Vietnamese student who went to study in the US. Can you tell that story? Because I had so much respect for Lan after I read that story.
Oh man. And why that is so impressive is because she grew up kind of being by herself a lot in Vietnam because both of her parents had to work. There was no option for them to be home. So she remembers all these times like playing with literally like sticks and rocks by herself and thinking to herself, my worst fear would be to ever be alone, like in a foreign country. She actually remembers that was her biggest fear as a kid. And then when she turned 16, her mom presented her with the exciting news that she's going to do an exchange year in the US, right? That's what her parents had worked so hard for to enable that for her. And that she didn't really have much say at all in the decision. So she found herself on the other side of the world, her worst fear having come true and just feeling so alone, not only because she was on the other side of the world, but she ended up in a high school where she was the only one of 2 Asian kids out of 1,000 students or something. So it just felt like she didn't belong. And honestly, it felt uncomfortable. Like she didn't feel happy. And then her mindset shift that she did so young, it's actually really amazing how people do that so young, was that, okay, right now there's nothing I can change about it. So even though I feel uncomfortable in the situation, it is an opportunity to learn about a different culture. Like I could pay attention and notice, oh, this is something that's different that I like. And this is something that's different that I don't like, you know? And so she took it as an opportunity to learn and then ended up learning and becoming so smart about culture that she became the person in the university, college she then went to later, to welcome students that came from other countries and help them like understand the culture, you know, feel more comfortable in the culture. That became her role. And she actually ended up loving it. That's a few years later, of course.
Of course, yeah.
But a very cool journey.
But in that moment, when I was reading about her sitting alone at lunch every day, I'd imagine she probably, you know, didn't speak English maybe as well that well.
Yeah.
And that no one would sit with her and just wanting to go home so desperately. And to transition from that to, okay, I'm going to make the most of this. What can I learn here? I was just like, wow,
that is badass.
13-year-old girl is a Buddha. Like, that's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yes.
Another story that I loved was actually, it's my favorite set of questions, I think, was after the story of the Brazilian woman who had been a bridesmaid. What you wrote, and I was like, that can't be true. You wrote she had been a bridesmaid 30 times.
This is true.
Oh my gosh. Why would that? That's so horrible. Bridesmaid 30 times, but never a bride. And she didn't understand why love wasn't happening for her. And then, do you want to tell the story?
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was on her 40th birthday, right? She had been doing that for probably 15 years, being a
Sure.
bridesmaid everywhere.
Oh my
So
God.
it's, so on her 40th birthday, she's like, oh no, yeah. And her dream from being young, right, was always, her dream was just three things: to have a beautiful house, to have a good job, and have a beautiful marriage. Like that was part of what she had always wanted. Yeah. So at 40, she's like, oh man, she actually faced like that this was not happening for her, right? And she asked the question, like, why? Like, what might I be doing to contribute to this, you know? And then she did the very brave thing of asking some of her friends, like, what might I be doing to contribute to this? Super brave. Um, and they gave her some feedback that, you know, while like she was a bit of a control freak, which worked out really well in her job, but for relationships less well. So she got that feedback. She got herself a tattoo that said "let it go," you know, on her wrist, kind of
Yeah,
remind
yeah.
herself. And she is actually now happily married. I think she got happily married at 42. And she told me that story that like sometimes when her husband is late, running late, they're going out together, he's running late. That is a scenario where in the past she would have tried to control the situation. Now go in, make him hurry up, you know, critique him. Like now, I thought this was so cool. She goes to the kitchen, boils herself some water, and makes herself a tea, and sits down and has that tea. And I thought that was so cool.
That is so
Yeah.
cool. And I think it also shows the power of good questions, because I think for most women, if they ask their girlfriends, like, what's wrong with me? Like, they would normally say, like, nothing wrong with you. Guys suck. I can't believe, like, you're beautiful. You don't
Yes.
take anything. Don't settle, girl. But she probably asked something more intelligent. Like, and I think she actually did have a period where she was like, oh, what's wrong with me? And then
Yes.
she shifted to, okay, I think there might be skills I'm not learning. That, like, she kind of shifted into a more empowered question, right? And that's
Oh
what she asked her
man,
friends, not what's wrong with me. Am I not
the
pretty enough?
asking good questions is a favorite topic of mine.
Mm.
Just the difference between asking a yes or no question,
Mm-hmm.
which doesn't get you good answers, it doesn't give you good results, to an open-ended question. It's like, how are you experiencing this? How am I contributing? You know, how could this work? It makes all the difference.
Yeah. So what would be if someone was in that situation and love is not working out for them? Because you are such a great question asker. How would you ask your girlfriends? What would be a good way to ask that question?
Yes, I mean, so anything that starts with what or how, all of
Mm-hmm.
those are good questions, like
Yeah.
no, yes or no question. So questions like, okay, how am I contributing to this? What might I do, you know, to change this like
Yeah.
outcome? What would lead to a different outcome in your opinion? You know,
Yeah.
how am I making this hard for myself? You know, how am I kind of creating this? Like how and what questions work well? Well,
Okay, I love this, because after that story about the Brazilian woman, the reflection questions you have is, what is a dream that has not come to fruition yet for you? And then you ask, how might you be blocking your desire from becoming reality? This is really courageous work. Even just answering the questions takes courage at the end
right.
of the. And then you could also say to your friends or loved ones or anyone who's going to give you an honest opinion, in your opinion, what this is what I came up with. What do you think? Or do
Yes.
you think, is there anything that I'm not seeing about how I might be contributing to this situation?
That is something I've actually found interviewing these women, that people are more likely to take the brave step, you know, to move towards their dreams. If there is another person, let's say like a courage buddy or, you know, a girlfriend, like somebody who has that same goal for them. Um, my favorite study of all times is that they put you like at the bottom of a mountain, and they let you estimate like how steep or high is that mountain. And then they put a friend next to you, and then you estimate like the mountain to be like 20% less steep or high.
Oh,
It's the
great.
same thing with courage. Yes. If, I mean, oh man, it's the best thing to invite a friend, a sister, whatever, into like even reading stories together, or like talk, brainstorm with, okay, I have this situation. Like, what could courage look like? It's just a success factor to have those people.
Oh, it's so true. The more you involve other people, the easier it gets, for sure. And one thing I noticed is that sometimes the courageous thing is to do nothing. It's to rest and to allow. I don't know if you can remember one of those stories off the top of your head. I didn't make a note of it.
Yes, because that was a very surprising one to me. That was towards the end of my trip. And I'm asking this lady, what's the bravest thing you've ever done? And she says, I've moved abroad, which is scary. I've taken a scary career. Like she's in actually like, it is, yeah, her job takes lots of courage. And she said, but guess what? None of these took the most courage really for me. For me, what takes the most courage is when I have a day where, let's see, I'm just exhausted, and I know that my body and brain needs a day off where I just sit on the couch and I watch like Hallmark movies or something. The bravest thing for me is to have the courage to take that day off and to not try and problem solve anything. And I was like, I hear you, right? Yes.
How did she figure that out? And I'm asking you this too. What are some questions we could ask ourselves so that we can understand when courage is asking us to do more and when it's asking us to do less?
Yes. I mean, it's definitely a feeling on the inside. Like basically you can check in with yourself. What's the argument that first comes to your mind for doing either? And then you could pay attention to, for example, in her case, the argument for why she shouldn't take the day off would be like, well, because like, things will go to shit like at work if I don't show up today. But that is a fear-based thought, And then if you ask, why should I take the day off? You can't really only formulate like non-fear based answers like, well, my body needs some rest. That's a good answer.
Right. But if you say, I should take the day off because I can't handle that scary meeting.
Yeah, that's different.
Then that's you kind of making an excuse to take a day off.
Yes.
when you should be facing the fear. So again, it's about, what's your excuse? What's your reason for wanting to do the thing? Is it coming from an abundance mindset or a scarcity fear-based mindset?
Yes. Well,
does that feel right? Something like that.
Yes.
Okay, we're on to something, Gina. Okay.
Yes.
You've received messages from people who have been through your book and it really helped them get over a fear. Can you tell one of those stories?
Oh, yes. That's my favorite part now of this whole thing that I did. So coming back to that fear of I'm too old, this is probably one of my favorite stories. 73-year-old April from Oregon, she had been working with rescue horses all her life. So those are horses that are traumatized because people didn't treat them well. And she worked with them to help them trust humans again and maybe even compete in races again if they were race horses before. And so when she turned 70, she just really thought to herself, I'm too old to do this work now. And she felt this fear of like falling off the horse or, and so she stopped doing the work that she loved. And with that, she felt a lack of like purpose and passion and like energy, vitality in her life. So she did that for maybe 2-3 years. And then she read these stories in the book. And just somehow those stories made her think, what if I'm not too old? And then she journaled about, okay, how could she like face this, right? And she came up with ideas that I didn't even know were an option. Like she bought herself a protective vest so that if she falls off the horse, she's protected. I didn't even know that existed. And then also things that just make sense, like start going to the gym and build up your muscle, right? To protect yourself. And so she just now this summer worked with another traumatized horse again, and then ended up participating in this 35-mile endurance race, and they competed successfully. And she said, now I know I'm actually not too old to enjoy life, like to be active, to do the work I love. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm taking notes for myself for when I turn 70. I want to be that person.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what an amazing impact to have on someone with these stories and these questions. That's incredible.
That's actually the other thing I've been thinking about is when we take a small courage step, right? We do it because we're thinking about our life and we have to figure our own life out, right?
Sure.
But I have now noticed right now that I collected those stories and I'm sharing them, I'm seeing like the ripple effect of how one courageous action in your life inspires somebody else. It's like there's energy behind this, and there's some sort of energy that comes from hearing a story like that is like a gift to me, and I can now use it to make a change as well. And it's cool to see and to think about like the ripple effects that your little step of courage might have for someone else.
It's so true. It's so true. I love that. Gina, I know that everyone is going to want to go on this journey, embracing your brave in 30 days, tell people where they can get your book, follow your work, and keep in touch.
Yes, you can go to wavesandwords.org. So waves like the waves in my story at the Atlantic Ocean, and words like spokenwords.org because com was taken. So you can get it there. I actually created a discount code for 20% off. It's woo, like, Goals, Grit, and some woo woo shit. You can go there. And there is also a link to my Instagram and all that stuff. You can find that there. It's also on Amazon too, but I can't really create a discount code there, or I haven't figured out how. So
yeah. Okay. So go to wavesandwords.org.
Yes.
And when they're going to check out, they write woo, WOO, and they get 20% off. That's so generous. Thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
That's great. Is there any story that we haven't hit that you'd love people to know, or anything you'd like to say to people who are wrestling with bravery in any way?
Yes. I mean, I've had women like quit their job and go on sabbaticals and like travel the world after this book. But the story I want to tell is from like girl in her 20s in Estonia. And she had never gotten her driver's license, which in the US is like impossible to imagine. Like, how did she even live? But in Europe, right, you have public transport. So she had actually been able to go to work and back by bus. But she noticed that she wanted to have the independence to like go into nature with her car whenever she wanted. And so it was like reading these stories. She got her driver's license, but still she got the license, but it still felt scary to actually get in your car and get into the busy traffic. And so what she did is read one of those stories every morning, then with the fear, like in the passenger seat, right, get in the car. And she was saying, with every drive, I can feel more independent, like with every drive. And this seems like a little step to us because we've all had our driver's license for like however long, right? But it's just like small things really make a difference long term. And if I would leave the listeners with one thing, I think I would go back to my favorite question, which is the question, what would it be like you to do if you weren't afraid right now?
Okay, awesome. So good. Gina, thank you so much for having this conversation with me. Thank you for sending me this book and an amazing postcard that really caught my attention. I'm so glad that I read your book, and they're fantastic questions.
Well, thanks, Una. This was so much fun. And thank you for creating this beautiful podcast that I love listening to. Thank you.
Hey, well, I am so glad that Gina reached out because I loved that conversation, and especially the part where she was talking that just at the end there, she was talking about that woman from Estonia who brought her fear in the car with her as she was driving. And I think that sometimes we get into this like bro mentality where it's like, I'm going to smash my fear. And instead, it's more like, I'm going to make friends with my fear. Sometimes my fear will even get to ride shotgun, but my fear never gets to drive the car. I drive the car, and I drive according to my values and what I want in life. As Gina says, she said, I demoted my fear to an advisory role rather than letting it be the boss. But anyway, I want to know what you got out of it. So send me a message and let me know. And listen, if you have someone in your life who is wrestling with fear, which is like, hi, all of us, like fear of aging, according to Gina, is almost universal. Send them this episode so that they can get those awesome questions and swim through that wave rather than letting it tackle them, or even worse, staying on the beach and kind of wishing that you could go swimming. Looks really nice out there, but they're scary waves, right? Okay, until next week. See you then. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.